So welcome everybody to this latest video on 162 Math, and in this video we'll be going over how to factorise a quadratic when you've got a multiple x squared in the expression. Now, factorising quadratic equations with multiple x squareds requires a slightly different way of thinking when factorising into double brackets. It can be done by inspection, so you can just see a question and be able to know exactly what goes inside each bracket. But when the coefficient of x squared is not a prime number, this method can be very time consuming. Now, before going through a method on how to do this, it is important that you don't make a question more difficult by not spotting the basics of factorising. Now, before we go through the method, it's important that you check to see whether you are dealing with an equation or whether you're dealing with an expression. Now, if you are dealing with an equation, you will often find an equal sign, and with any quadratics, when you're most likely going to be solving this quadratic equation, you need to make sure that it's equal to 0 first. So it may require some rearranging. So in other words, you may have something that looks like 3x squared minus 18x equals 6. So before going on to factorize that, we need to make sure that we make it equal to 0 first. And also try and keep your x squared positive. So another example is if I had, let's say, 3x equals 10 minus x squared. Now, although the x squared's on the right hand side, we want to try and keep it positive. So let's take the 10 minus x squared over to the other side. So we get x squared plus 3x minus 10 equals 0. And that was just a case of just some simple rearranging. Now, the other thing to look out for is to check if there is a common factor in the coefficients of all powers of x and the constant. So for example, with each of these questions, you might be thinking to yourself, right, this is going to be a little bit difficult for me to factorize simply because I've got more than one x squared. Now, with these, what you want to try and be able to do is spot that all of these numbers, so for example, in this first one, we've got a 2, we've got a 12, and we've got a 16. Well, they're all multiples of 2. So before we even go on to factorize, what I can do is I can take 2 out. So I end up with x squared plus 6x plus 8. And then from this, all I can then do is just then factorize what's in the brackets. So then I keep the 2 separate. And so I'm then thinking of two numbers that multiply together give me 8. Added together give me 6. So that's going to be 4 and 2. I've got x and I've got x and I've got a plus and a plus, giving me a final answer of 2x plus 4, x plus 2. Looking at this the second one, we've taken 3 out, so we've got 3x squared plus 3x minus, and then 54 divided by 3 gives me an answer of 18. And then from this, I can factorize what's in the bracket. So I keep the 3 separate. So what two numbers multiplied together give me 18 with a difference of 3? Well, that's going to be 6 and 3. And then just got to decide on the sign. So this is always the sign of the bigger number. So 6 is bigger, so that's going to be a plus. And this is a minus, which means the signs are going to be different. So the answer then is going to be 3 lots of x plus 6, x minus 3. Then with the last one here, I can take a 5 out. So I've got 5x squared take away 1. This then is a difference of 2 squares. So then it gives me 5x and x. I've got a 1 and a 1. One's a plus and one's a minus. So now let's have a look at the actual method. Now, this method can be called several things. So if your teacher has called it a different method, then that's absolutely fine. I tend to call it the magic number way just because it uses the notation of a magic number. Now, if these steps make absolutely zero sense to you at all, do not worry, because when we go through some examples, I'll be recalling these 5 steps. So hopefully they will make sense in its entirety. So looking at step 1, the first thing we want to do is find the magic number. Now, with these complex quadratics, you'll always have something x squared plus or minus something x plus or minus something c, in which b and c could be 0. So just be mindful of that. Now, the magic number is basically multiplying this number here with this number here, including any signs. So I just multiply those two numbers together and that will give me the magic number. The next thing for me then to do is to then find, so for example, let's just move on to this one here. So with this, what we want to do is we want to find, it says find two numbers that multiply to equal the magic number and add to make b. So for this, what we're looking at is two numbers that multiply to equal a times c, but added together equal b. And once you've got those two numbers, the next thing for you then to do is to replace the bx in the original expression with these two numbers as coefficient of x. The next step is then to factorize the pairs, being mindful of the signs, and if this is done correctly, the brackets should be the same. And then the final step is then factorize again using the common bracket as one bracket and then multiples in another bracket. Now that might seem like a big waffle, but like I said, hopefully when we go through some examples, I'll be recalling on each of these steps and show you exactly what we mean. So now let's have a look at some example questions. Now once you feel comfortable with the method, then feel free to pause the video, have an attempt at the question on the screen, then unpause to see if you get the same answer. So looking at question 1, it says we need to factorize 3x squared plus 7x plus 2. So for this, what we need to do first is to find the magic number. Now the magic number, I'll just write that down, is basically the coefficient of x multiplied by the constant. So here the magic number is going to be 6. So what I'm looking for with step 2 is I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 6, but added together give me the coefficient of x, which is plus 7. So what two numbers can we fill in with the same number being in each of the boxes corresponding to the lines? So here we're going to have, so what two numbers multiply together give me 6, add together give me 7. So it's going to be positive 6 and positive 1. Now for the third step, all we're doing here is we're going to write down the equation of 3x squared, but instead of writing 7x, I'm going to use these two numbers instead. So I'm going to write plus 6x plus 1x, and then we've got plus 2. Now don't worry about what order you write those blue numbers in, because if you do it correctly, it shouldn't really matter. Then the fourth step rather, is to factorize the pairs. And so what we mean by that is to factorize the first two things and then factorize the third and the fourth. So here looking at this, what goes into both 3x squared and 6x? Well, that's going to be 3x. And here I end up with x plus 2. And then what goes into both 1x and 2? Well, that's going to be 1. So that's going to be x plus 2. And remember, you can use 1. Now, if you have done this correctly, you should find that the things inside the brackets should be the same. If they're not the same, you've definitely made a mistake somewhere, so it may be a case of going back and re-evaluating your options. And then the fifth final step is if I draw my double brackets. Now what's going to go in one bracket is the common bracket, which is x plus 2, and then what goes in the other bracket are the two things that are outside the common bracket. So here it's going to be 3x, and here I've got plus 1, and there is my final answer. So now let's have a look at the second example. So here we've got 2x squared plus minus 3x minus 2. So here my magic number is going to be 2 times minus 2, which is minus 4. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together to give me minus 4, but added together give me minus 3. And it's always a case of being mindful of the signs. So for this, I'm going to go for 4 and 1, because that works. And you might be thinking 4 plus 1 is 5, but if I turn that into a minus 4, then minus 4 times positive 1 gives me minus 4, and minus 4 plus 1 gives me minus 3. So here I write down the equation, so it's going to be 2x squared. Instead of writing minus 3x, I'm going to be using these two numbers instead. So I've got minus 4x plus 1x minus 2. Then I factorize the pairs, so that becomes 2x, x minus 2, plus, and then factorizing these, I get 1. That's going to be x minus 2. You can see that my brackets are the same, so far so good. One bracket is that common bracket, and the other bracket are the two things that are outside it, so it's going to be 2x plus 1. So moving on to question 3, we want to factorise 4x squared plus 17x minus 15. Now a little reminder to what we mentioned at the start of the video is that we want to check to make sure first of all that there's no common factor between all our coefficients. So here there is no common factor between 4, 17 and 15. So what we then need to do is follow the steps. So here let's first of all work out the magic number. And in this case our magic number is going to be 4 times minus 15, which is minus 16. Again, be mindful of the signs. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply together give me minus 60, but added together give me positive 17. Now if you're struggling to think of those numbers in your head, then just try and write down the numbers that multiply to two numbers that multiply together to give you a magic number. So here we're looking at 60 and 1, 30 and 2, 20 and 3, 15 and 4. We're looking at 12 and 5, 10 and 6, and I think that's pretty much all the possible combinations. And then once you've got those combinations that all multiply to equal 60 or a magic number, excluding the sign, let's look at how we can use those numbers to make potentially 17. Well, I can't make 17 by adding and taking away 60 and 1, so that's not going to be the case. 30 and 2, I can make 32 or 28. With 20 and 3, I can make 17, so there are going to be my two numbers. So here I've got 20 and 3, and then once I've got those two numbers, this is a sign of your bigger number, so it's going to be positive 20, and because that's a minus, it means the signs are going to be different. So I'm looking at positive 20 and minus 3 is my two numbers. So then writing the equation again, replacing 17x with 20x and minus 3x. And you can see that I could have written this as minus 3x plus 20, but the 20 goes nicer with the 4 and the 3 goes nicer with the 15. It just makes that factorising a little bit easier. So here factorising the pairs, what goes into both 4x squared and 20x, well that's going to be 4x, and then I've got x plus 5, and then what goes nicely with 3x and 15, well it's going to be minus 3, and I've got x plus 5. And again my brackets are the same, so it's a good I'm on the right track. So then setting up my brackets, I've got x plus 5, and then in the other bracket I'm going to have 4x, and I'm going to end up with minus 3. Then moving on to question 4. So again, what we want to do is just want to double check to make sure that there is no common factor to start with. So there's no common factor between 4, 4 and 3. So unfortunately it's that 3 that's spoiling things. So here we then need to work out our magic number. So our magic number in this case is going to be 4 times minus 3, which is minus 12. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together give me minus 12, and added together give me positive 4. So the two numbers that we're probably thinking of are going to be 6 and 2. And for this to get positive 4, it means that the 2 needs to be negative. So from this, what we then need to do is then swap our 4x, our positive 4x with 6x and minus 2. So here I've got 4x squared plus 6x minus 2x, and that's going to be minus 3. Then factorising the pairs, I've got 2x, and I'm going to end up with 2x plus 3 and minus, and then it's going to be a 1. 2x minus 3, or plus 3 I should say, and then from this then we've got 2x minus 1, and I've got 2x plus 3 as my final answer. Now if I decided to flip these two things around, I should still end up with the same answer. So for example, if I wrote 4x squared minus 2x plus 6x minus 3. Now I might choose to write it this way simply because the 2 goes nicely with the 4 and the 6 goes nicely with the 3. So then factorising the pairs, and all this method does, it just makes it a little bit easier, so you're not having to deal with any 1s outside of a bracket. So here I end up with 2x minus 1, and then here I factorise this, so that's going to be a 3, in which I end up with 2x, and it's going to be a minus 1. And then here you can see my brackets are still the same. So here I've got 2x minus 1, and I've got 2x plus 3, and you can see here that these two answers here are both the same. Then moving on to question 5, we want to factorise 3x squared minus 16x minus 12. So again, first of all, just check to make sure there is no common factor between the coefficients, so there isn't. So here then, to find the magic number, it's going to be 3 times minus 12, which is minus 36. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together to give me minus 36 and added together give me minus 16. So again, thinking of 36, we're looking at 18 and 2. Well, straight away I can use them to make 16. So that's most likely going to be my combination here. So to make minus 36, so again looking at this symbol here, that means that the bigger number is going to be a minus, which is minus 18, and this sign is a negative, which means the signs are going to be different. So it's going to be minus 18 plus 2. So then looking at this, my next line is going to be 3x squared minus 18x plus 2x minus 12. Then factorising the pairs, I take 3x out, so I've got x minus 6, and then plus 2x minus 6, and then so my double brackets are going to be 3x plus 2 and x minus 6. Then moving on to our next example. So again, here we're looking at some rather large numbers, but one thing I should notice is that there is a common factor between 25, 80 and 15, and that common factor is going to be 5. So then if I factorise with regards to 5, then what that then becomes is 5x squared plus 16x plus 3. So we'll ignore the 5 to begin with, but let's treat this as a separate question. So we'll come back to that in due course. So let's have a look and write 5x squared plus 16x plus 3. So here my magic number is going to be 5 times 3, which is 15. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together give me 15 and added together give me 16. And those two numbers are going to be 15 and 1. So then I'll replace 16x with 15 and 1. So I've got 5x squared plus 15x plus 1x plus 3. Then factorising the pairs, I get 5x and I've got x plus 3. Then factorising this, which is 1, so I get x plus 3. And then here I've got 5x plus 1 and x plus 3. Now I can't forget about the 5. So if I swap this big bracket with 5x plus 1, and just close that bracket there, with 5x plus 1 and x plus 3, my final answer is going to be 5 lots of 5x plus 1, x plus 3, and there is my final answer. Now finally, let's have a look at an exam style problem solving question which is from a non-calculator paper. So this question says that if the area of the rectangle is 15 centimeters squared, find the value of x. So looking at this question, now some of you may be able to tell me what the answer is straight away just by guessing, but unfortunately that's not going to get you the full marks because we're going to need to solve this algebraically. Now to work out the area of a rectangle, we just simply multiply the length by the width, or the height times the base, whichever you prefer. So basically I'm going to multiply these two brackets. So here I've got 3x minus 10 multiplied by x minus 2. Now that's all got to equal 15 centimeters squared. So what we've then got is 3x minus 10 equals x minus 2, equals 15. So from this, if we expand the brackets out, then what we get is 3x squared minus 6x minus 10x plus 20 equals 15. Then as this is an equation, we need to make it equal to 0. So we take the 15 over to the other side. So we end up with 3x squared minus 16x, and then I'm going to end up with plus 5 equals 0. Now here you can see that there is no common factor between 3, 16 and 5, so then we need to factorise this to solve it. So here our magic number in this case is going to be positive 15. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together give me positive 15, but added together give me minus 16. And the two numbers you should be thinking of are going to be 15 and 1, and they are both going to be negative. So it's minus 15 and minus 1. So then swapping the minus 16x with minus 15x and minus 1x, we get 3x squared minus 15x minus 1x plus 5 equals 0. And then factorising the pairs, we get 3x and we get x minus 5 plus 1x minus 5 equals 0. So then we end up with 3x plus 1 and x minus 5 equals 0. Now when we've got factorised it into double brackets, basically from this what we then got, if I just move this down, so either 3x plus 1 equals 0 or x minus 5 equals 0. Now if I solve this particular equation, I'm going to end up with 3x equals minus 1, so x equals minus a third. Now this cannot be the answer, as we would end up with a negative length, as it would equal a negative length, which on a rectangle we can't have. So the correct answer and the only answer should be x equals 5. So our final answer, what is the value of x? It's going to be x equals 5.